So precedence is a concept I believe everybody is very familiar with. We hear all the time when something is coming up that it is unprecedented. It's usually how we talk specifically of the idea of a precedent. But for me, precedence is kind of like a law of physics in my life. It's one of these things that you have to be accepting that is there and understanding really very deeply how it is, not just the concept, but the impact and the force it creates, because it's something that creates opportunity, because it's something that creates immovable forces that you have to work with if you want to be able to take advantage of it. And basically, this year has been littered with opportunity for me to talk about this topic. And I'm not talking about the concept of precedent. I'm talking about the force of the precedent, the impact a precedent can have in something that you're trying to do or in an environment that you're in. Most of the time, when a group of people think about an industry, a society, etc., or hobbyist, or anything, is doing things in a certain way. That could be that you do an activity, or you do a business, or you develop a certain kind of products. The majority of the population in this cohort will not be challenging the way things are. They tend to kind of stick to what they know, and there's a lot of momentum in the ideas on how to do things. And you'll see examples about this everywhere. Recently, there was a video that came out about how DJI disrupted the FPV industry in a group that had been basically hacking as a community, putting videos on drones for the longest time. And then out of nowhere, it came out. And my reaction to it was that, well, yeah, you guys got used to it and didn't think the video could be any better. And so it came out of the outside. And in this context, like out of this group of people who didn't think about bringing the kind of video that DJI brought in. They didn't think it was conceivable. They didn't think it was really like something to get into, or they couldn't find the possibility of making it happen in this context that they're in. Regardless, DJI came in, introduced something brand new, and suddenly, everybody is having a different look on the entire experience. Now, usually, when it goes in, you have different kinds of reaction, but what is really universal, before I go into these, is that there is just no putting that genie back in the bottle. So I use the FPV example because there was a recent video. I pulled the links. But there's countless examples of these precedents that have been created in the past. And so usually when this stuff is coming in, the genie's out of the bottle, the people tend to have two kinds of big reaction to it. There's people who are now moving on with the train, right? They're just like a flood of new ideas are coming in. They're looking at the world in a different way, so they're just going with it. And there's people who are bargaining with the reality. There were people who will be holding on to the old ways, and they will be like, defending it, etc. And as I'm saying this, I want to take a 2-second pause in here and let you think about if you can relate to what I'm saying right now. If what I'm saying right now is not making you think of the AI, the Gen AI that's coming in and how it's going to replace jobs. And if you haven't seen this about all sorts of different kinds of precedent that happened before the internet, before that, etc., right? Because you're going to realize this is what I said. This is a law of physics in my life, quote unquote. And I think it should be appreciated as one in yours too. So as soon as this precedent is created, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Some people are going on with it, creating new ideas. Some people are denying this entire thing. But no matter what you do, there's a brand new realm of opportunity that is being created. There's a positive impact to it, and there's a negative impact that this new piece of knowledge creates for the entire society. I'm going to give you a few examples. I have plenty, but I'm going to try to go like bit by bit. Number one, historical one, very basic, very relatable, the creation of nuclear weapons. The second the world knew, as the bombs dropped in Japan, that this was possible, those who were observing and paying attention, who had a vested interest and an ambition into this specific segment, they couldn't think about anything else but trying to harness this power themselves. To this day, it's a topic about countries who are trying to harness this power for themselves. This is what I'm talking about when I'm saying the force of the precedent. It literally changes the entire world. It changes humanity. It's that important. If you take things a little bit lightly and on something that is not technological, because I have a lot of technological example, because technology as a whole is very good at creating precedents. Back in the day, when the $1 trillion company was not a thing, there was a lot of conversation about whether or not this would ever happen. It was an unconceivable number for a valuation of a single private entity. And then I believe it's Apple who became the first $1 trillion company back in the day. And then suddenly everything changed. It took us some time, and it took a couple more companies to join the $1 trillion club. But nowadays, I have an example for this. You'll see company will go around and tell you that they want to be the next $1 trillion company. I say that too. And the reason is because that precedent, that force that has created, which was, more than 10 years ago, 15 years ago, has been shaping the entire definition of value all over again. And $1 trillion is the new unicorn. I'm exaggerating slightly here, but I'm trying to just create a contrasted storytelling so that you can get the point across. If you go back into the technology and things that are very, very visual right now, there's of course the Ukraine conflict and the FPV drones. That's a genie you're not going to put back in the bottle. And there's a lot of bargaining and conversation, etc., and everything. You've probably read the articles because this stuff is all over the internet going on. Western armies are kind of figuring out what they want to do with this. China on the side is like demonstrating these things that you have, very public videos. Regardless, and my point is not about politics. My point is about the force of this precedent is here, reshaping the world as we know it. On a less, call it offensive side of things, a less aggressive side of things. What Boston Dynamics has created with legged robots over the past few decades has created one of the craziest precedent in the technological industry. So first of all, before we dive into this, I still believe at this point that Boston Dynamics is the leader in this entire industry. They have the better technology, they have the better product. They might not have the best go-to-market, and I don't know exactly if they're going to be the winner at the end of it. I don't believe that the first mover advantage is such a powerful force. I know it's a thing. I agree it's a thing. I don't believe it actually makes or break the winners. So on the legged robot now, you have a plethora of legged robots. Back then it was Ghost Robotics who came out with one, all right? And we thought it was like, yeah, this is it, the competition. Then Unitree came one. It was kind of clunky. And recently Unitree got their act together and their stuff is like much, much better. And then it was the humanoid robots. Now we have a plethora of humanoid robots, and we're told that you're going to have a bunch of humanoid butlers at home. The entire thing is changing. Now, I'm not telling you to buy a humanoid robot, but I'm saying that the force of the precedent that Boston Dynamics has created is now visible in every part of society. I think that because you have all these companies going, I think that the value of the product is what's going to be fundamentally sealing the deal. And this is why if you look back into the nuclear weapon, the cost of making one, the infrastructure, the impact that it has is, I'm sorry to talk about it this way, but it's an incredible product value that you have for it that means that it seals the deal. If a humanoid robot makes no sense as a butler in your house, doesn't matter about the force of the precedent, it will not work. But today, you have a lot of companies who are investing a lot of time and money in developing these humanoid robots and the supporting technology for these humanoid robots and these legged robots. And you have now a societal change. You have the very cool competition that happened in China where you had the humanoid robots Olympics, I'm going to call it this way, where they were like kind of doing these things and running around. It was very cool to watch if you haven't seen it. But all these force of precedents, they also have a negative impact. And this is because when you're trying to make a big change at the society level and you're ignoring the force of the precedent that has been put in place, this precedent comes back and fights back at you because we as human beings cannot be conceiving the world in a different way once we know it could be in a certain aspect, certain way. And that's the force of the precedent. So I'm going to use a very sensitive story, in which I have obviously a very biased opinion. I'm not trying to convince you or anything. I can defend my particular position, but that's not the point here. The point is really keeping it to actually how the force of the precedent impacted in here. So in the US, the government, over all sorts of different reasons, decided to ban DJI or in the progress of banning DJI or something like this. And ever since this started to come, ever since the sword started to be above the head of all the DJI operators, there's been a very loud group of people who are the first responder community. The operators and firefighters and police who are using these drones for all of their activities that they got to do, right? And the main one that was really putting forward was search and rescue, SAR. And the reasons for this is because these drones have been used for the past and saved a lot of people. Now, this is the precedent that was created when DJI basically gave these tools to all these people very much not knowingly. Not a single drone was developed purposely for search and rescue. They just happened to be very good at what they were doing, and they ended up used in that context successfully. But then all of these operators, all these first responders, they knew, and they couldn't forget. They couldn't put that genie back in the bottle. That there was all of this different situation that before they would have just accepted that to their best effort, they wouldn't have been able to do something. They know now that with this technology, with these products, they're capable to get to these people who get lost, these people who fall on cliffs, these people get injured, these criminals who are hiding on rooftops, and all these different things. And you can't come around right now from the policy making side of things and rug pull them and then says like, just make do with what's out there. Because the precedent has been set. And because they know now what could be done, and because they also do not have an actual replacement. Now, this particular point is a big amount of debate. I have my opinion for sure. My opinion doesn't matter. The only opinion that matters is the end user and those who are actually going to be putting these drones to use. And until they say that there is a replacement, there is. If they don't, there isn't. Because they're the one who are going to be the one flying these things when the time is going to be critical to actually try to save people. And that's where it matters. Now, when this technology came in the search and rescue world, there was a counter that was, I don't know if it was tied by DJI, but it's definitely kept tracked by DJI now, of the numbers of people who were saved by drones. And again, this is a subjective counter about people who have been discovered in a situation that from the experience of the first responder, the drone made a very big significant difference in where it happens. You're not going to see a people died by the DJI BAM counter, right? Because, this is going to be extremely hard to actually put in, but the first responders will know. Because they have the experience, because they understand the situations, because they know what kind of efforts would have done what, because they know exactly what has been possible. Because of that precedent, they have this knowledge that this could have been possible if they had access to these drones. They're going to be able to know themselves that, yep, this person died because we couldn't get a drone. So when they're telling you this, they're not creating a sensational piece, right? They're telling you from their own experience what they've observed, that what kind of effort yields what kind of result. And that precedent, that technology is creating an incredible capability in that area. So that's the part that I think is actually very important. Now, for the lesson on the precedent side of things, I'm not going to give advice on the policy things. It's not my place. But from the policy making side of things, and this is where it for me it's more interesting. It's because this ties up to other areas. Sorry, I'm drifting a bit. My mind goes fast. If you are making policy to control or to structure the pace of technology and the precedent it creates, that is understandable. There's nothing wrong with that. But what is important is that you have to fully appreciate the force of the precedent that these precedents create. And it's not always equal, because they are very big. They have a very significant impact. I think for all the bad rep that they get, the European Union as a governing body is trying to do their best in controlling these things in terms of the technical. I'm going to go with silly stories in here, but in terms of the technical standards for charging phones, in terms of the data privacy with GDPR, there's always like this effort over there to actually try to put some control and guardrails around this. And it is a difficult thing because you want to control as much as possible the impact it has on society without, suffocating the positive element that the force can create. But what you cannot do is just go willy-nilly, blindly making, policies without any appreciation for the force the precedent has. And I'm not saying acknowledging the precedent, because this happens all the time. What it rarely happens, at the point why I want to make this video, is that the force that goes with the precedent, the size of it, of the seismic shock it creates, is often, like I said, it's either dismissed, argued with, bargained with, or people are just running around with the opportunity. And there's a need to actually take a second, there's no need to make a podcast about this. Just you and yourself, take a second and ask yourself, what is the impact of all this going to have? And that's very important these days, because like I started to say, today, I use the droning story, but today, the AI concept, the generative AI, the LLMs, is that tremendous precedent that is being created. I don't believe that they're going to be replacing as many jobs as people say they are. But I know they're going to replace some jobs, for sure. they're definitely going to be having an impact on scale. We're going to be able to do more with less people, which means a team of 100 people before is going to be like 50 people tomorrow. And so there's a real force to that particular precedent. And there's going to be a need to actually discuss on how, the policy is going to have to be written or not on this front, but that has to be done with a full understanding of the force of the precedent. Now, back into engineers and product people, the people I do this content for mostly. What is important in here is that precedents and their force create opportunity, create a liability, create an ethical concern for you if you're the one creating the precedent, and create a context that you have to be understanding and accepting. And I don't want to be like bashing on them, etc., but Boston Dynamics could be the Apple of robotics today if they had, in my opinion, handled this particular aspect better. Because right now, I think they haven't really appreciated the force of the precedent they've been doing, laser focusing on building the best robot that is out there. And now they're surrounding themselves with a crazy amount of competition, and the name's not out. We don't know who is going to be winning this particular race right now. And it's anyone's chance to actually get there. And that's a very, nice way of capturing, in my opinion, what is a real impact if you don't pay attention enough to the force of the precedent you're creating.